Going to get you to some breaking news that's coming at the moment. 3 people have been killed, at least 60 others injured at these protests we've been reporting about amongst Syria's Alawite minority. This particular one was in Latakia. There have also been demonstrations in other cities, the cities of Tartus and Homs. The protests, of course, they were called by the head of Syria's Supreme Alawite Islamic Council after a bombing targeting a mosque in Homs during Friday prayers. At least 8 people were killed then and more than 18 others injured in the explosion in Wadi, al-Dahb, which is a majority Alawite neighbourhood. We can get straight over now to Damascus live and join the Rasul Sardar. So what do we know?
Well, as of now, still the gatherings are ongoing. So yesterday, the religious leader of the Alawite communities, Ghazal al-Ghazal, has called people to take the streets starting from 12 noontime up until 5 p.m. local time here. And there we have seen the gatherings, particularly in Latakia and Tartus. These are the coastal cities where the majority of the Alawites in the country lives in. And then, of course, we have seen tight security measures as well. But later, then this protest got a little bit tense, and the skirmishes, the clashes started with the security forces. However, we have seen also some videos being circulated among the protesters calling for violence against the security forces here. And then now it's confirmed that at least 1 member of the Syrian security forces is killed. As of now, there are reports about 2 other people being killed. However, it's not confirmed yet whether the government, some of the sources are saying that they are the remnants of the old regime, some saying they are the civilians. However, at this moment it's extremely difficult to confirm that. But we know that at least more than 40 people also have been, including the security forces members, have been injured so far. So this is definitely showing quite a dangerous situation in Syria. 1 year on, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, still we're seeing that the country is far away from achieving the goal of the national unity. And the divides are still in place, whether they're political divides, whether there are divisions along the sectarian lines or the ethnical lines. So the government is having quite a difficult time really to keep up the country together. However, within an hour, it's expected that these protests are going to be concluded, but we are seeing that the government is reinforcing the forces, sending more and more military vehicles and personnel, particularly to Tartus and the city of Latakia, where the majority of the Alawite communities are living here. Of course, this call of Ghazal al-Ghazal, the so-called religious leader of the Alawite community, that call has came after the bombing in Homs. And now Ghazal al-Ghazal is emerging as a leader of the Alawite communities. Very little known about him. We know that he's an old cleric, and from the Alawite sect here, it's not clear where he lives. So people are saying that he doesn't live in Syria, but it is not clear whether he's living in Iran or in Lebanon. Very little known about it. But on the other hand, some of the people that we have been talking to, they're criticizing him, saying that, well, during the 14 years of a brutal civil war, when Assad regime was killing hundreds of thousands of people, they haven't heard from Ghazal al-Ghazal. And now that he is calling the Alawite minorities to take the streets in the coastal cities, many are saying that these are the clear provocations. So here, the thing is that the civil war is over. However, the scars, the wounded are still here. The government in Damascus is dealing with the aftermath of a brutal civil war that killed nearly 1 million people and also displaced 14 million people, 65% of the country's infrastructure being destroyed. So it's not going to be easy for the government to overcome that. And of course, on the other hand, while that protests were taking place in Tartus and Latakia, in parallel, there were some Sunni groups also protesting and calling the government to immediately conduct the transitional justice, because there are also millions in this country that they are saying, well, the regime, the former regime, has committed that atrocities and many of high-level former regime members that were involved in these crimes have not still been taken to the courts, and the transitional justice is still here and waiting to be addressed properly.
Rasul, okay, the two parts of this question here. Of course, let's talk first of all about the various things that the Sharia government has to deal with in terms of the various conflicts taking on, as you were just mentioning, in the post-Civil War era. But what about the Alawites themselves? Do they get perhaps picked on because the Assad regime was Alawite?
Indeed. So the Assad dynasty that has ruled over Syria for 54 years was a member of the Alawite community here. So, and in the town of Qardaha, in the outskirts of Latakia. And that's why many people now, majority of Syrians, are also accusing the Alawite communities of not protesting against Bashar al-Assad while he was committing these crimes against Syrians here. That's why, so here on one hand, the Alawite communities, after majority of them, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, they're feeling that they're excluded from the system. They have lost their privileges here because during that 54 years rule of Assad regime, we will see that majority of the high-level diplomats and particularly the military ranks will go to the Alawite sect here. And so now they feel that they are excluded from New Syria, but on the other hand, there are Sunni majority in the country saying that, well, those who have committed that atrocities should be held accountable. So that's why it's an extremely huge challenge now for the government here. But on the other hand, the government is meticulously careful to make sure that there is not going to be societal confrontations. Just remember the bitter memories of the march last year. So there has been some remnants of the old regime ambushing the security forces, killing 14 members of the security forces. And right after that, there has been quite an escalation. So from all across Syrian cities, we have seen thousands and thousands of fighters, military vehicles rushing into the coastal cities of Latakia and Tartus, and as a result, around 1,400 civilians have been killed, both from Alawite communities and also from Sunnis. So the government is very well aware of this sectarian tension in the country. That's why today we have seen, despite loss of the provocations, the security forces that were heavily positioned and present in Tartus and Latakia were trying to de-escalate the situation, to calm down the situation, because they are afraid that such a scenario, that what happened in March last year could repeat again. And that's why that could lead to societal confrontations here.
Rasul, just give us a sense, as a final question here, whether, despite the tragic events of today, whether things are gradually perhaps returning to some form of normalcy.
Indeed. So the protests or the gatherings, let's say, was scheduled to be from noontime, local time, up until 5 p.m., which roughly around 10 minutes later is supposed to be concluded. So as of now, what we know is that one member of the Syrian security forces have been killed. Some of the sources are telling us that they have been shot by some remnants of the old regime. Just let's remember, particularly at the coastal cities, in the mountainous areas, still there are some militias of the former regime army. And from time to time, they're ambushing the security forces. They are making some of the sporadic attacks. And also, in some cases, they're positioned in the cities as well. They have the rifles. They have quite a good amount of the weapons that are from time to time being used against the security forces here. But overall, today, there are more than 40 people being injured. However, as of now, the health sources are not telling us how many of them are in critical conditions or if there are any that are in critical conditions. But what we know, one member of the security forces is killed, more than 40 people are injured, And also there are reports of 2 more people being killed. As of now, we do not know whether it is they are also the member of the security forces, whether they are civilians, or whether they are the remnants of the old regime. However, the government is saying that the situation is under the control. They have had a heavy military deployment both in Latakia, in Tartus, and also in the countryside. And in 10 minutes, according to schedule that was announced yesterday, these gatherings are supposed to conclude.
Rasul, thank you so much. Rasul Sadar joining us from Damascus. Just to reiterate, we have this breaking news come through. 3 people have been killed, at least 60 injured in these protests by Syria's Alawite minority in Latakia, the coastal town of Latakia. There demonstrations also held in other parts of Syria too.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.